The first time I met my daughter's husband, he didn't even shake my hand. He just stared head tilted. Lips tight ass. If I was some beggar who had wandered into the wrong room, I still remember the moment clearly. It was a Sunday morning, and I had been invited or rather reluctantly tolerated for a family brunch at their sleek new house in the suburbs. My daughter, Anna, had recently married Thomas, a man she described as polished, well-connected, and from a higher circle. I hadn't seen her much since the wedding. She'd grown distant, her calls shorter, her tone stiffer. Still, I hoped this visit would rebuild something. I wore my best coat. A little old, yes, but clean and neatly pressed. My shoes were scuffed, but I'd polished them that morning. My hands were worn from years of working, but my nails were trimmed. I looked humble, but I carried myself with pride as I stepped through the door. Thomas glanced at me from over his designer sunglasses and raised an eyebrow. "Anna," he said quietly, "I thought you said your mother was elegant." I heard it, clear as crystal. Anna's face flushed. "Thomas, this is my mother, please." He looked me up and down. "Right. Of course. Pleased to meet you." But he never extended his hand. I smiled anyway. "Nice to meet you too, Thomas." Brunch was awkward. Every word I said was met with a fake smile or polite nod. Thomas barely spoke to me. He laughed with his parents, bragged about his recent business school connections, and shared plans to interview at an elite logistics firm with a bright future. I knew the name of that firm, because I owned it, you see. 27 years ago, I started with nothing. Widowed at 28, a single mother with a baby in one arm and a second job in the other. I built my life brick by brick. I cleaned offices, waited tables, and eventually bought a small delivery van on loan. That van became 2, then 5, then a fleet. I named the company after my late husband Robertson Freight and Logistics, but I never told Anna. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I wanted her to live freely without the burden of money or expectations. I invested in her education quietly, supported her from behind the curtain, and let her believe I was just a hard-working, modest woman who lived in a simple 2-bedroom house on the city's edge. Now, I sat across from her husband, the same man, who once said without knowing I'd overheard your mom's suite, but she doesn't really belong in our world. Their world.our-class.dirty. I looked down at my hands, the same ones that built the empire he was desperate to join. Calloused, a little wrinkled, but these hands signed paychecks for over 400 employees. These hands helped build a company whose doors he would walk into very soon, CV in hand, ambition blazing. He just didn't know yet. After brunch, as Anna walked me to the car, she tried to apologize. "Mom, Thomas is just blunt sometimes. He doesn't mean to come off cold." I smiled gently. "I understand, sweetheart. Please don't take anything personally." "I don't," I said, and I meant it because I already had a plan. That Monday, I called my executive assistant, Rachel. "Send me Thomas Martin's resume," I said. She hesitated. "He just applied yesterday for the assistant operations manager role." "I know," I replied. "I'd like to meet him personally. Tell HR to proceed." 2 weeks later, Thomas walked into our downtown headquarters, dressed to impress. Expensive cologne, sleek gray suit, Italian loafers, every bit the rising star he believed himself to be. He didn't recognize me. I wore a plain gray cardigan and glasses. I sat quietly in the back of the boardroom as my VP led the first round. Interviews. I watched as Thomas talked about his strategic mind, natural leadership, and drive to climb high. He dropped buzzwords like breadcrumbs, synergy, scalability, long-term impact. I waited after the interview. I had Rachel call him back in for a final discussion with senior management. He entered the room with his confident smile. It disappeared. The moment he saw me sitting at the head of the table, he blurted. "Yes," I replied calmly, standing. "Me." He stood frozen, mouth slightly open, unsure if this was some prank. "I'm Evelyn Robertson," I said, "founder and majority owner of this company." His face drained of color. "I believe you said once I wasn't your class." I didn't mean you also said I looked dirty, didn't belong," he stammered. "It was a misunderstanding." I was nervous. "Joking, I see." I nodded, then gestured to the seat. "Let's talk about your future here." He sat down slowly, clearly unsure of what was coming. "I've reviewed your file. You have potential, but not in management. Not yet." He blinked. "We're placing you in janitorial services. Starting next week. Night shift." "What?" His voice cracked. "It's where I started. Sweeping floors, emptying trash bins, cleaning restrooms. You'll learn discipline, responsibility, and humility. I have an MBA. So did 3 of our top janitors. And unlike them, you've insulted the owner." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because I remembered the young man. I once believed my daughter would end up with someone kind, respectful, humble. Not this, but this was no longer about punishment. It was about teaching a lesson life had skipped for him. He reported to work the following Monday, mop in hand. He avoided my eyes when we crossed paths in the hallway, but I noticed he did the work, silently, carefully, without complaint. Days turned into weeks. I received quiet reports from the janitorial supervisor. He's not slacking, he's actually listening. Then one evening, I saw him pause in the hallway staring at a framed photo of me and my late husband in front of our first delivery van. He stood there for 5 minutes, and for the first time, I saw shame in his eyes. Not guilt, understanding. 3 weeks into his janitorial shift, Thomas began to change. At first it was subtle. He stopped wearing flashy watches and began arriving 10 minutes early. He no longer looked down when I passed him in the hallway, though he also never dared look me directly in the eye. I kept tabs on his progress quietly through shift reports, team leads, and floor managers. He doesn't talk much, said Mr. Ruiz, the night supervisor, but he listens, works hard, even helped one of the older workers carry cleaning supplies up to flights of stairs. I nodded without emotion. This wasn't about revenge, it was about humility, something money couldn't teach, something the polished walls of his MBA never forced him to confront, but I had to be sure. On a rainy Thursday night, I walked through the operations floor just before midnight. Only the janitorial team was still around. Mops swished quietly. Buckets rolled. The usual humming of machinery had gone still. That's when I saw him. Thomas was kneeling in the corner, carefully scrubbing a floor stain others usually ignored. His white shirt sleeves were rolled up. His expensive hair was messy. His eyes looked tired but calm. Focused, taut. He hadn't seen me. I walked closer. "Mr. Martin," I said softly. He turned, startled. "Ma'am," he said, quickly standing and wiping his hands. "You missed a spot," I said, pointing behind the trash bin. He looked down, embarrassed. "I'll get it." I handed him the brush from the utility cart and waited as he crouched to finish the task. I asked, "Do you still think I'm not your class?" He paused, then stood facing me. "No, ma'am. You're far above mine. Because I'm wealthy." "No," he said, voice firm. "Because I built nothing. And you built everything." His voice cracked slightly. I used to think money was the mark of class, but now I notes character. I watched him carefully. There was no arrogance now, just honesty and regret. "What changed?" I asked. He glanced around at the clean, silent floor. "This job," he said. "These people, they don't wear suits or speak in buzzwords, but they show up every night, without praise or power, and do the hard work. And I never saw it before. I thought I was above it." He met my gaze. I was wrong. I nodded slowly. Then I said, "Follow me." We walked through the building, past the break rooms, the dispatch station, the logistics board, and into the CEO's corner office. Mine, I motioned for him to sit. He looked around nervously, clearly unsure. "I only ever gave one employee this chance," I said. He looked up. "My husband," I added softly. His expression changed. "He passed before we could grow this company together. But I promised him one thing. No matter how big we became, I'd never forget where we started. With a mop, a van, a night shift." I opened a drawer and slid a folder toward him. He hesitated. "What's this, an offer?" He opened the folder. Inside was a new contract operations associate trainee, full-time with a 6-month mentorship track under direct guidance from our senior team. "I don't understand," he said. "You want me to stay?" "I want you to learn." He blinked. "After everything I said to you," I folded my hands. "You've said sorry with your actions, not your mouth. That counts more to me." He looked down, tears quietly rising in his eyes. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. I leaned forward. "Maybe not. But sometimes life gives second chances, not because we've earned them, but because we're finally ready to receive them." He signed the papers and started the very next week. 6 months passed. Thomas kept his head down, worked hard, and became a quiet asset to our operations team. He took notes, asked questions, volunteered for shifts no one wanted. When a warehouse flood happened, he stayed all night, helping organize emergency rerouting. By the end of the year, even the most skeptical managers had changed their minds. "He's not the same man who walked in here," one of them said to me, and he wasn't. But the biggest change happened outside of the office one Saturday. Anna came to visit. She hadn't called ahead, just showed up at my house with a nervous smile and a large paper bag of pastries. "I wanted to talk," she said. I let her in, made tea, and waited. She sat quietly for a while, staring at her cup. "Thomas told me everything," she finally said. "The janitor shift, the meetings, you being the owner." She paused. At first I was furious. Not at you, at him. For how he treated you. For lying. For being a snob. She sighed. But he changed. I see it in the way he speaks. The way he listens. He comes home tired but proud. Like he's finally grown into someone real. I watched her carefully and I realized I'd changed too, she added. I let myself believe we were somehow better. That money made us superior. But Mom, I forgot where I came from. I forgot you. Her eyes filled. I'm sorry. My throat tightened. I reached out and took her hand. It's not too late. A few months later, during the company's annual appreciation dinner, I stood at the podium, surrounded by my staff, employees, and their families. After the usual announcements and awards, I paused. There's someone here, I said. Who? Once made a mistake. A big one. He judged someone by their appearance. He let pride blind him. There were murmurs, but instead of throwing him out, we gave him a mop, and he took that mop with dignity. And every day since, he's worked his way back through sweat, silence, and humility. I looked across the room and found his eyes. Thomas Martin, please come forward. He stood slowly, stunned the room, clapped gently at first, then louder. With warmth, he walked to the stage, hands trembling. I handed him a plaque, for resilience, humility, and transformation. He whispered, "Thank you." I smiled. "Don't thank me," I said into the mic. "Thank the woman who raised you, better than you realized." From that day forward, Thomas remained one of our most loyal employees and one of my greatest quiet success stories. He never went back to his old arrogance, never forgot the mop, never looked at anyone as less than every Mother's Day. After that, he was the first to call, because sometimes the greatest revenge is redemption.